Hello?
Hello, I'm Christina.
Hey,
Um,
I'm Leslie.
nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Thank
I would
you.
love to see if I can put a virtual background on. And I'm echoing.
Oh, that might be me.
Is it you? Can you hear me now? But I can't hear you.
I might have to go on and off mute.
Do you want me to take my earpods out?
I was echoing last week, so maybe I'll
might
try
be
and
you.
connect my earbuds and see if that works.
Okay. So in the meantime, I'm going to see if I can get a virtual background on. Let's see. I have one that it's giving me the option for one. Let's see. Ah, okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, and now you're in paradise.
I'm in paradise. Oh, and I am echoing again.
Okay, I'm working on connecting these things.
Yep. I'm also trying to figure out how to lower my volume, which I can do when I haven't been, but not with I don't know how to do it with my AirPods.
Is this better?
Is that better?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not echoing. Now, do you have any hints to me how I can lower my volume? Something changed with my whole computer setup probably last week, so it probably has nothing to do with anything on your end. It's really weird, but I'll be fine.
If you go into like settings, is there a sound? Maybe there's a way to adjust.
I know. I looked. Yeah. Yeah.
It always
Don't
looks
worry
very
about it.
cryptic also when I go in there.
It's so bizarre. I could go without my earbuds, but then what happens is that I've learned I have a new computer, but yet my microphone on my computer hasn't been working well. So I think I'll just leave these in, and maybe I'll take one out. Let me see how does that
Is that
sound?
easier? I can hear you fine.
Yeah, it might be better. Okay. Okay. Did you get my other one suggested?
I did add your question. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate you doing this. I know I was talking with Josh about this panel, and he had mentioned what you work on, over the months that I've got to hang out with him a little bit. And I was like, well, maybe your mom wouldn't mind.
I'm not sure what I can contribute, but you nailed it when you described so and so is up here and I'm down, Leslie's down here, and so and so is in the middle. So that's good. I think I'll just I have no idea. And haven't seen any previous ones, but I'm just gonna see what I can provide, and I'll also be interested in what the others have to say. And so, what's interesting, Christina, is that so this is teams, leaderships, but leadership, I still don't know how you all are dealing with leadership, but we'll talk about that. Hi.
Yeah, that's what Leslie is an expert in, or Lisa. I'm glad you
Yeah.
get to meet now. Yeah.
Great.
Yay. Hi, Leslie. Great to meet
Hi,
you.
Lisa. Hi, nice to meet you.
Oh, I
I
love
was
it.
just, yeah, I was
I
just
was just
saying
going to
that.
say hi to Christina.
Yeah,
I know, a hug. I haven't
I
seen you in
know.
a while.
It's been too long. Go ahead, Leslie.
No, I was just saying this is so new to me, and I'm interested in hearing how to think about leadership in the DAO framework, and really, because there really isn't leadership, but I guess you've done work with leadership, so well, it'll be interesting to. I'm just going to kind of take your all's lead, and I'll chime in when it makes sense.
Well,
Okay.
Leslie, we actually need some grounding. Lisa can probably attest to this. We are literally like on the edge of the Wild West of space. And so having someone that is like, this is how it actually works with real humans on Earth, we need that, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Christina, I saw like in the Telegram thread, it's just like kind of quick hit intros, and then the format's just talking for the first like 40 with Q&A. Is that kind of how the flow's been going? Nice.
Yeah, I don't know how much time you have. They've been tending to go about 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But I am really want to like respect everyone's time. So if
I
you're
was
ready to
planning
go.
90 because I saw that it went to
Okay.
90, so I'm down for whatever.
I actually wasn't, because I didn't know 90. I had 60 in my calendar, and I have
Yeah.
another meeting at 11 o'clock my time. I'm so sorry.
No, that totally works. Yeah.
Okay.
I only wanted to block off an hour on everyone's time,
Mhm.
and just if people can stay, then they might want to. Um, yeah, have you met Katerina, Lisa?
I don't think so, but part of me in this space, I'm always like, oh, but I've seen them, or oh, I did meet them, but it was a
You probably
different
have,
context.
definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I hope she shows up soon. Um, yeah, I met Katerina. I got to see her and like hang out with her in person also. Um,
Oh, that's
so
great.
I don't know, Leslie, if you're gonna be around for GFEL in September.
Josh was supposed to send me information on the dates and everything, and I would love to. Is it like the 13th,
Mhm.
14th? Yes, I would love to pop in and be around for part of it. Yes.
Um, oh, awesome. Katerina's here.
Hey, great.
Yay.
Hey,
Thank you. I know it's late where you are. I haven't let anybody in. Just maybe if you want to meet each other.
Yeah. Hi, Katerina.
hey
Hi,
everybody.
Katerina.
Hi, Lisa and Leslie. I'm currently in the car with my friend, so I'm gonna stay on off camera.
Sounds good.
Where is Katerina?
Um,
Where are you?
I'm currently in Poland, in a part that used to be Germany. So we did a lot of history today, and
Oh
I'm gonna
my.
continue doing more Poland tomorrow. I'm gonna travel to see another friend.
Okay, now I'm
Oh.
going to put my other earbud in so I can actually hear Katerina. So it's good that they're loud. Okay.
okay, I'm gonna start letting people in. Yeah, really excited to have everybody here. GM friends. I shared this link in the DAO's channel on Warpcast. I was like, I think we might need this. Um, so welcome so much, everyone we'll probably just go ahead and get started real quick. I know people tend to come in around 10 minutes after the hour. But this is the first session for week 3 of Local DAO Summer, which has been really inspiring. And yeah, so the first one is I really wanted to have this panel because I have felt the growing pains of working in DAOs, but I've also really enjoyed the autonomy I have by working in DAOs also. So maybe we can go through and let everyone introduce themselves. Maybe go with Lisa and then Leslie and then Katerina.
Hi, everyone. Great to see some familiar names. I'm so thrilled to be here. I am a co-founder of Bolster Leadership. We focus on developing amazing human flourishing across both Web 2 and Web 3. And yet also I am so excited to be here. Christina invited me and I had the privilege of meeting her in person when we were working on a project called Family DAO. And also I was a founding member of Talent DAO. So I've had little over 3 years and counting in the DAO space, and absolutely love doing research, facilitation, coaching, and great work. And so I'm really excited to be surrounded by these amazing people to be talking about teams and leadership and all the stuff that makes DAOs absolutely exhilarating to work in, but also very frustrating at times. So really excited for the conversation.
Hey everybody, I'm Leslie Hammer, and I'm I don't know enough about DAOs to even speak with any authority about DAOs. But what I do know a lot about is occupational health psychology, and I'm an occupational health psychologist, and I have been in this field for 30 years, and I've been working on really understanding ways of improving health and well-being of workers. And that's what my passion is. My passion is health and well-being of workers. And outside of the DAO space, I've been in real workplace work organizations and really seeing how traumatic the workplace environment can be for individuals. And so what I am dedicated to with my career is improving workplaces so that people can be healthier and happier. So again, my background is industrial organizational psychology and occupational health psychology, and I'm at Oregon Health and Science University. And it's such a pleasure to be in this space with everybody. But again, please know that my knowledge about DAOs is limited, and I am here to learn as well. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Hey, I'm Katerina. Thank you for inviting me. I'm co-founder of Together Crew, a community analytics tool that started within R and DAO, so research and development DAO. Before going, head directly into DAOs, I was an academic researching community and teams, trying to figure out how can we get strangers to work together, and what better environment than DAOs to actually see it happening or not happening, depending on how that goes. So I write a lot about relationships and community and connectivity, and that's it. Thanks for having me.
So what I'm really excited about is that, Katerina is way, what did I describe? Like way out past the edge of the solar system. And Leslie is grounding us here on Earth. And Lisa is like commanding all these satellites that is communicating between them. So really, really grateful that you're here. Maybe we can go in the same order and just maybe describe what like motivated you, what to focus on, like Lisa's you're working on leadership and so maybe we can just go through and a little backstory.
Yes, I love that. So my background is like 15 years focusing on leadership development in traditional corporate settings. And it was about 2018 that we were supposed to look at what's on the horizon that all leaders and organizations should learn about. And that's really where I got introduced to blockchain technology. At the time, it was more about supply chain transparency. And yet it wasn't until 2021 that I became more interested in the space, and particularly because I started mining helium. So I have a little helium antenna on my roof, and it just opened my eyes to all the different applications of how you can really take any traditional model and say, what if we really hyper decentralize this and use the power of blockchain technology to open up new possibilities? And that's when I started realizing, gosh, this isn't just about supply chain transparency. It's not just about a few use cases for organizations. There's a real human side and phenomenon to what's happening here. And so I got really interested, and of course that led me to DAOs, and then became a founding member of Talent DAO, which really focused on this idea of how do we study DAOs for the benefit of all DAOs as a DAO. So that way we're really having this meta living experiment. And I absolutely loved entering into the space in that way as part of the decentralized science movement, because it really put a rigorous and relevant lens on how to look at this space where a lot of what was happening was really, and still is, very, I think, revolutionary, very pioneering, and also grossly misunderstood by people outside of the space. And so how do we break it down into pieces, synthesize it, and help educate people so we can all function and have better lives and realize the dream that we're all working toward? And so that's more about how I got into the space. It fits very well with this idea of democratizing leadership development. How do we not just treat certain people in organizations as leaders, and how do we really view each person as being able to lead from their position? And so that led to 3 different studies that I've done over the past 3 years, looking really in depth at leadership in DAOs and what it means for us to lead effectively and to have leadership, because even though we want to flatten organizations, leadership still emerges. So how do we do it well?
I guess I'm up, right? Lisa, that it's great to hear you're really talking, for me, you're talking both worlds. So I was able to connect with so much. Wow. I mean, but big, Christina, big question. So how did I end up here? I mean, this is, first of all, as I mentioned in my introduction, I've been studying health and well-being of workers for 30 years, and for more than 30 years, actually. And what my research really brought me to about 20 years ago was the power of leaders and leadership and supervisors and managers in workplaces, and their power to impact health and well-being of workers. Because my complete passion is around helping people to feel healthy and successful and engaged in what they're doing in terms of work. And so what I really have learned, and what I learned, and what others also before me have shown, is that unfortunately, leadership and supervision and management in workplaces can be very harmful. It can also, I mean, there's also positives, but I knew that they had such a powerful impact on health and well-being. So I started to examine ways of changing leadership and training leaders to be more supportive of workers and employees. And what that involved was really identifying with my colleague, Dr. Ellen Kosick, in the early 2000s, we identified what we called were family supportive supervisor behaviors. And we've published extensively on these family supportive supervisor behaviors. So we started with teaching supervisors, how do you support working families to be, to be able to thrive, and what do leaders need to do, and what do leaders need to change in the workplace to make things better for working families. And from there, I really extended that concept. And I've been so fortunate to be funded by the federal government. I was funded by the NIH. I've been funded by the CDC, and I have been funded by numerous federal agencies to examine these structures, these leadership structures in workplaces, and to change them, and to learn about ways of changing them, to teach leaders to pay more attention, to increase the psychological safety for employees, so that we can actually close that gap between, and which is what we're all talking about, is really, I guess, the breaking down the distance between leaders and employees. And that's a lot of what I would say I've been doing, is breaking down that distance, because there really doesn't need to be there's not a lot of reason why there needs to be distance, and why there needs to be power that leaders have. That is not, we don't need that to function effectively in workplaces. And so the latest trainings that I have been evaluating and actually implementing, and have been taken up by a number of different workplaces and public and private sector, is focused on workplace mental health and training leaders how to better support mental health of workers. And we actually find in this work, and again, I should say 100% of my research is in workplaces. I'm an academic, but I haven't done a laboratory study since 1986. So all of my work is engaging employees and workers, and really learning what do they need from their supervisors and managers to feel better at work. And we know that there's been so many damaging aspects of work that have broken down psychological health and well-being. And so what I've been trying to do is really build up psychological health and well-being of workers, and through the actions of leaders and managers, because of their impact. So it's been an interesting ride, because now, since COVID, we see workplaces, traditional workplaces are finally paying attention to mental health of employees. Finally. I mean, I've been screaming this for 30 years. Others have as well. And we finally see workplaces paying attention. And now what we need to do is provide them with tools so that they can actually know how to better treat people. And that's really what this is about, is treating people well, and respectful and caring. And that's really actually what I train in my, what I focus on in my training. And I always say, this is not rocket science. It's kind of basic human nature, but honestly, a lot of people need to be either reminded or trained for the first time. And I think that we can then expand this to teams. And that's what we're actually talking about in my, within my research team, is really expanding this work to teams, so that teams can learn to team members can teach each other more humanely and caring to improve mental health and well-being. So I'll stop there.
Katerina, do you want to share your backstory? What led you to?
Yeah, I can share my backstory. So I spent a lot of time wondering what if a person starts to talk with another person, or why do they each other, and how can we get people to try to do the same thing. So when we have a task in front of each other, we have different assumptions about how we should be going for the same direction. So how do we get what is inside of our head out? And so this is all around sharing. And for me, if you don't have information, the decisions that we by the information that we have at times, and that's why I researched information sharing for so long. Different hours, I was a lot of time in academia, and I got bored by the lack of impact that I was having in my field. It was all just about writing papers, but not really about improving teams. Really, we would research how to improve teams, but it wouldn't really end up with the team itself. So I was like, fuck that, and let's just do something else. And that's how I ended up with the hours. And then, funnily, I'm now doing exactly the same thing that I did before, just under my own rules and kind of processes. And I decide what I'm doing. And I'm still research teams. I still research how to get people to do things together. I still work with teams and measure the health of the community and trying to help communities to work together. And I'm still teaching. So that's my backstory.
Thank you. So I think, Leslie, we'll start with your question that you suggested earlier. And maybe if you want to go ahead and answer it, and then if Lisa and Katerina want to respond. The question was, what do we know about things that impact the health and well-being of our team members?
Okay, that's great. I get to start off with this question that I posed. So, and I see Meredith is on here, and Joshua, who knows my work extensively and personally, and what do we know? What do we know? Well, there's a massive amount of evidence out there from the organizational sciences. So, Christina, you wanted me to bring us to earth. Okay, I'm bringing us to earth. There's a whole fields of organizational sciences and management and in industrial organizational psychology. And part of those fields, some of those fields have, and some of those, the focus there has been on really how do we support not just workplace productivity and increasing the output, but how do we actually support the people and the and how people are experiencing work, and that's really important in and of itself. It's some people will argue, okay, well, it's important to focus on employee health and well-being because it leads to the bottom line. Well, there's also a whole group of us that argue it doesn't matter what it has to do with the bottom line. What matters is how people are experiencing work and how people are feeling about their lives, and what have we learned about how the workplace unfortunately has really broken down so much for individuals. And I am a workplace psychologist, and so what we know is we talk about the workplace risk factors, and we talk about the workplace environment. And so, people know about, are familiar with the physical risks and certain work. So physical risks associated with construction work, for example, physical risks associated, with lifting in healthcare environments. I mean, there's lots of physical risks associated with working. And actually what me and a lot of other people focus on also are what we call psychosocial risks. And these are the risks that have to do with the experience and the environment and the social relationships at work, and how if those are not thriving, they can have a severe impact on individuals. And what we actually have evidence of is from meta-analyses and from experimental research studies in workplaces, is that when the workplace is not structured well, and when we specifically see high demands, so excessive demands on people, when we see little control that people have over the work that they do, and when we see that they have low levels of support. So those are kind of three major triggers that can lead to lead to decrements in psychological health and well-being. And there's data that show that those workplace factors are related to depressive symptoms, to anxiety, and to other mental health outcomes, as well as physical health outcomes, cardiovascular disease, diabetes. And so why are we not changing the way that these workplaces are structured if we know that they are impacting how we are both mentally and physically? And this has been the struggle of my career and many others also. And so that, what do we know about health and well-being of workers? We know a whole lot, and we know that we can really change the way that work is structured. And there's an enormous resistance to that for all the reasons why you all are here, why this is happening, because there is a recognition that the way that work is structured is not, I don't want to say it's not always working, but it's not working well, and it is harmful. And so researchers and practitioners have identified what we need to change, but yet there's the rub of resistance, and there's resistance to change, and there's also there's fear of change, and there's also concern that outputs will change if we reduce the demands. And yeah, outputs may actually change. That is the reality. And what that leads to is healthier people. So I guess that's what I starting off with. And I'm sure that Lisa and Katerina can add to this discussion, because I already realized you both know exactly what I'm talking about. So yes, it's fascinating, but it's also very frustrating and very sad when I can say that we've known for decades about the harmful effects of work on people, and yet we still see work happening in the same way.
Oh my gosh, where to begin? There's so much goodness there. And thank you, Leslie. It's a great question. And it's also a great grounding that you provided to really get into the topic more in depth. I think there's so much to be said about what it means to be healthy at work, what it means to have a healthy relationship with your work, and what it means to be able to navigate that and have a sense of autonomy or agency over how you continue to craft and create your sense of work and your relationship with it. And I think that's been one of the most liberating parts of being a part of DAOs. Is it does feel like some of the things that traditional organizations try to square peg into round hole, like saying you have control over this, and yet there's a person who determines your pay increase each year, or whether you have visibility to certain promotional efforts or not. People who say we want all of your ideas, but then ultimately they get superseded by somebody higher up who has a friend, or there's a different path forward or a different change in strategy. Oftentimes in organizations, when there's a change of leadership, there's a whole change of trickle-down effect of the dominoes that go into play that make other people in that organization feel like those efforts may not matter as much. And so there's almost like these lessons that we learn in a more hierarchical structure that we're not necessarily seen as leaders, that there are certain people who call the shots and we might execute more. And yet in the last few decades, the way people have looked at leadership is evolving our sense of it being just a position or a title, that it's more about a process that you engage in, that you can lead from anywhere within an organization. And whatever that role is, you can become excellent at it. And yet also there are these things that systematically in traditional organizations tell us different stories about who really at the end of the day gets to make decisions. Also just in the last 5 to 10 years, we see big trends, especially with like big tech, giant layoffs to balance the books at the end of the year. You get this sense that humans are pretty dispensable if it comes down to saving that bottom line of the organization. And so I see DAOs as this really wonderful alternative that is so much more modular and so much more crafted to be square peg and square hole versus this trying to address the human needs as an aftermath process. It's really this upfront, how do we begin with a deep collective purpose that we all share? And how do we want to design structures that allow us to each bring our best self, our best effort? And along that lines, how do we become very mindful and intentional about power dynamics and authority and who can do what? And so this is like the vision, the promise and the excitement that I feel is I think traditional organizations have a lot to learn from what's happening in the DAO space. Very similar to, way back in the day, there was design thinking. It was something that was coming out of Silicon Valley. IDEO was seen as this company that was doing it really well. It was like, wow, there's this whole different way to do work. And all these chief innovation officers caught wind of this and were like, wow, we can go in, get out of the office, really observe our consumers more, and we can test, learn, iterate, do rapid prototyping. And then we started realizing, like, gosh, this isn't just for chief innovation officers or innovation teams to bring the stuff back to. It's not just for product development. This is actually really great practices for any business, for any way of doing work. And so it kind of transformed our relationship to work to being one where you had to get it right, plan out your 5-year strategic plan, to now looking at it as more iterative, short cycles where you can truly learn and fail fast and fail forward. And all those principles and philosophies really became embraced. And that is the excitement that I feel about DAOs, is I feel like DAOs are the biggest playground for human coordination that we've had in decades. And the things that are happening here about trying to make composable organizations, trying to really cross-pollinate, trying to have permissionlessness, and really trying to have this sense of a porous organization work is extremely exhilarating. And yet it doesn't always work out to our best intentions. And so that's the part that I think is the promise that excites people about the DAO space, is how it really does reimagine how we can do work as human beings. Even when I started at Talent DAO, we had one standing meeting, and it was asynchronous, and people had their avatars and their profile pics and totally different names. And we didn't need to know what country the other ones were from. We didn't need to know these certain things in order to drive, because the connective tissue was the mission and the purpose. And that's really what spawned the organization from the get-go. And that was, I think, such a different way of thinking about work. And then, of course, you got to know the people. I met many of the people in person at different conferences globally, and there still is this deeper connective tissue that remains because of that work. And yet we're still trying to figure this out. And so I have so many more thoughts on it, but the one thing I did want to bring in from the research we did is one of my first projects with Talent DAO was with a phenomenal researcher named Pietro Marenco, and him and I collaborated on this work looking at distributive, collective, and shared models of leadership from the past 70 years, looking at different meta-analyses, trying to say, what can DAOs as this new space learn and build on the shoulders of giants of work that's been done in different forms like co-ops. And it was, again, meta-analyses, which are, literature reviews that study literature reviews. So really looking in depth at what can we learn from what's been done. And one of the big highlights that I would share is that there's a nice body of research from 2020 that looked at what needs to happen even for shared leadership to emerge. So this whole promise of not as hierarchical, flatter organizations focused on moving the work of the DAO forward, it really comes to light only when you have these 3 prerequisites. And it's only even possible to realize that dream when you have these prerequisites in your DAOs. And one of that is shared purpose. So making sure that you really have a salient purpose that people can rally around. The second one was social support. So that's a lot of what Leslie, I feel, was talking about. That, and it can be as simple as asking, like, if you needed help, is there someone who would lend a hand? And if you have people in your DAO that can say that can say yes to that, that's huge. And then the last one is really about voice, that people have a sense of agency and where the organization is headed. And so those are 3 prerequisites that I would say from our literature review and our meta-analyses that we reviewed that we think DAOs can learn from. And then of course, the next step that I took was interviewing people actually in DAOs, because we know in practice, it doesn't always go like everything I'm saying, which is a lot of the promise and the potential. So I'll leave it there and head it over to Katerina.
Thanks, Lisa, and Leslie for the wisdom that you have shared on that question. I was thinking what to add to it so that to not repeat too much. And what I want to add to the conversation is that it's a lot of, like, let's say if you're talking about change, if you're scared of change or if you're happy towards change, you're often influenced by the people that are right around you. So it's the closest circle of connectors or of discussion partners or just colleagues that make you willing to, or make you open to change, or make you kind of pushing it away. In relation to that is that we sometimes think about when we talk about information sharing, and it's just about the transmitting of factual knowledge. But actually, when you're sharing information with somebody, you're also in a way sharing energy. Like there can be a positive transmission, like joy or excitement or something, or also something negative like um, feedback that is more destroying. Or if there's wonderful research among teachers in Belgium that show that if your colleague shares her emotional frustration with the job, so indication of burnout, she's actually infecting the people with who she shares that emotional frustration with a burnout. So in a way, it's not just sharing information and getting support, but it's in a way it is infecting other people with the virus of burnout, if you want to call it like that. So the people with who you interact with, they are really crucial in shaping the health and your view on the organization. And then as Lisa mentioned about DAOs and the opportunity DAOs have, I do believe there is a great opportunity for it. I do think we are still very early. So what we have seen with the with DAOs, and we measure how fragmented they are and how centralized they are at a social level. Because a lot of the conversation in Web3 is around decentralization, but everybody talks about nodes and validators and forgets that it is people who actually write the technologies. There are people behind all these lines of codes. And if at a like human level we are centralized, that means that we have a core group of people who are taking part in all the conversation and who are shaping the conversation. So then there is centralization at the idea level. And this is still the case for most of the DAOs that we have looked at. They're still very centralized. But of course, most of them are still very young. But that is something that we need to take into account when we're thinking about the opportunities that lie ahead of us.
Thank you. So, Katerina, maybe because we coordinate, like we gather our teams together, like from the community. So it's not like someone saying you need to do this and this and this. It's like people decide what they're going to do when they're going to do it. Maybe just from your understanding of people working together and where maybe it's intrinsic motivation, maybe it's like social motivation, but like how is it what can you recommend for us to understand so that we are coordinating together in this way that encourages, like agency, all the things that we want, that we're trying to, I guess, learn and improve. Maybe Katerina, you can start, and then if Lisa and Leslie want to respond.
Yeah, definitely. I can start. And when I read the question in the document, I think being able to rely on internal motivation is a huge privilege most of the people on the world do not have. Most often we are driven by just the need to pay the bill. And you might hate your job, but you know what? Kids need to be fed and stuff like that. But to give it a more positive we talked about support and voice before. So while a lot of people might not be able to only rely on their internal motivation as a desire or as the kind of the force that helps them decide what to do, we do have people in leadership position who are able to provide the financial and emotional support, or kind of also just the right tools or the right mentoring, so that those who are not in that position can actually, let's say, make more use of their internal motivation. Let's say if we had a student who looked into burnout among female workers, like working for like high 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 performance female professionals, let's just call it like that. And those ones who were not suffering from burnout were the ones who, that even though they were taking on the job of a colleague who was going on maternity leave, they had somebody who took out the dog, they had the financial means to eat out every day. And these are the kind of the little things that that help a lot. So this is kind of just kind of to summarize my answers, that people need support, and this support needs to be or can be financial. And if financial is not possible, mentoring goes a long way. And I mean, lastly, as a leadership, I think, Lisa, you mentioned voice. Listening to other people and kind of showing that you listen to them, not just say, oh yeah, I'm going to listen to you and blah, 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 give me your ideas, but then not do anything with it. That just is like a slap in the face. So there's it's a huge responsibility on leaders in Web3 to actually make this new way of working possible.
Go
I
ahead
totally
and
agree.
yeah.
Yeah. Leslie, is it okay if I respond and then
Sure. Yeah, I'll go. Yes, I will go after you.
Okay, yeah, I have so much to say here, but Katerina, I completely agree with the sense of support, and especially of leaders and DAOs really listening. So I mentioned the research we did to look at what had been done in these other spaces that DAOs could benefit from, but then of course things are different in practice. And so the next study we did was interviewing 23 different leaders in DAOs. And again, leaders meant people moving the work of the DAO forward. So you didn't have to have a title. It didn't have to be a thing. Many of them were part of founding teams. And that's just because we were so early on that's where people were at in their experiences with DAOs. And what was so interesting is that burnout was absolutely a core issue to all these people working in DAOs. And a lot of it was that they were involved in lots of DAOs, maybe less so now, but especially a few years ago when you joined DAOs, you joined like 30 on your Discord and just got to see what was going on at all these different organizations cropping up. And now maybe there's a little bit more of a discerning nature to where you might spend your time or what you might join. There's also different risks. Lots of DAOs tilty. Yeah, of course. At like 50. I was like, oh boy. It was total overwhelm, because even if somebody told you, hey, you know what? Somebody was a good support to you and said, just be done, log off. That might have been great at one DAO, but then there was other DAOs that were pinging you and asking you for things and expecting those contributions to continue. And so there's this deep sense from the 23 people that we interviewed that yes, DAOs hold all this promise, and that it's much more important for us as individual people in this new relationship with work to know ourselves and our boundaries and to be stronger and more disciplined about keeping to those. And that is something that I think is, like I bottom lined it in the study as the new brand of leadership for the working world, regardless of what organization you work at, is mojo over ego. And this is because you need to know yourself, you need to know your strengths, and you need to be able to come boldly with your asks and offers. And that to me is absolutely where this is headed, and the beacon of light and potential that DAOs can be, but aren't quite realizing yet. And so I'm very excited about this idea of how do we get more support in the space. Even a lot of past research on resilience, often people associate the phrase bounce back with resilient. And some of the newer research is really saying, you know what, your ability to bounce back, that's almost like a lagging indicator based on how resourced you are. And so if you have resources like social support, if you have people who are willing to lend a hand or enough financial funding to secure your next few months, those things can make a huge difference to somebody showing up as resilient, being able to keep those boundaries, being able to give their strengths and coming with their asks and offers into this new world of work. And that's what gets me so excited, is thinking about how do we do that well? And that really requires us to know ourselves and to focus a lot more on awareness and building those leadership capabilities at a personal but also systematic level. So that way it's not just something where we come and then we learn that, oh, it didn't matter, our voice didn't matter. And so hopefully we can cultivate more leaders and DAOs that have that listening ear, as Katerina mentioned.
This is so fascinating. This is so fascinating. I want to kind of touch on what a little bit of what Lisa and Katerina have mentioned, and then springboard off of that. I want to go back to first, Lisa, your earlier mention of the 3 dimensions of shared leadership, and that social support and voice were 2 of those dimensions, and those are that is absolutely, I mean, that is front and center from what I know as well, and critical. And then that ties in with, you know, Katerina's mention of leader support and how that influences burnout, and how we actually do need to, then I guess bringing it back around and to Lisa, the last comments that you made around resilience, from my frame, we talk about organizational structure and organizational strategies and prevention strategies versus individual level strategies. And actually what we try to do is, in my field, in which it really is occupational health and safety and occupational health psychology, we try to move away from telling the individual what they have to do, because sometimes it's seen as blaming the individual, and we actually think that the structures of the organization have to change, and that which is really what you were talking about. And so that's why the social support, which is one piece of that structure, is so important to really facilitate and honor. Because if people feel that they have the social support of their team members and their leaders, their well-being is improved, as I've mentioned, and they are able to engage more. And so when we actually with in traditional organizations, when we're post-COVID, there's been a lot of discussion. Well, how do we develop social support in a virtual environment? And we don't know how to do that. And it's, you all know that. You all know how to do that, because this is part of what you're doing, is developing social support in a virtual environment. And I believe it absolutely is something that is, we can have relationships virtually as easily as we can have relationships in, face to face. And so convincing workplaces now, there's so much pushback out about stay at work from home, and so, I mean, we realize obviously with COVID that so many jobs, not all jobs, clearly not all jobs, but so many jobs can be done virtually, and yet workplaces are really trying to bring people back to the office, and people are saying, no, that doesn't work. And so that's not going to work for me now. And what we find is that people who are able to have that voice and that choice and that volition, and to be able to, if they choose to work from home, and then to develop those relationships virtually, that is working really well. And that's an effective way to lead an organization. And so the social support piece is, as we've been talking about, it is a way that we can change the system to support individuals in that system And so by increasing social support. So that's what because I study ways of increasing social support, which again, I want to go back to my comment. I always say this is not rocket science. It's about making people aware that your interactions matter. And there are ways that you can have interactions that are more supportive of others, that when you pay attention, you show engagement, you check back in with people when you hear something, and you can learn to really increase that sense of support, which then in turn, and absolutely interactions matter. And in turn, what we see is when the social support is high, we see lower levels of burnout. We see improved psychological health and improved physical health. And so what I've been really trying to get out there is, how do we do that? How do we increase that social support, both from leaders, but also just, among emerging leaders, team members, and why that that is so important. And it really is. So that's, it really ties in with everything. It's funny when Joshua and I were talking about this session, like I'm not sure what I can contribute. And I now see how this ties in so much with what Katerina and Lisa are talking about. So super.
Thank you very much. I think just looking at the time, I'll ask one more question, and then whoever can stay for Q&A can stay, and whoever can't, that's all good. So maybe Lisa, we can start with you, and then Leslie and Katerina can respond. And kind of elaborating on what we're kind of moving through is, if everyone can be a leader because there's no hierarchy, how do we, as individuals in the community, in a team, kind of like raise ourselves so that we can improve our relationing that actually contributes even more, so that we can, ultimately we want to feel pride in what we produce together and appreciation for collaborating. So I can let you go.
I love that. Yes. I think one of the things that I would channel from the 23 people that I interviewed was this idea that leadership in DAOs really looks like, at a very basic, simple level, moving the work of the DAO forward. So if you are moving the work of the DAO forward, you are in a place of leadership. You are exercising your role in that process of moving the work of the DAO forward. And I know Christina put a link in the chat to my research. You will see a much more academic definition and more details about what leadership in DAOs could look like. And yet, at its basic core level, when we start treating everyone in an organization like they're a leader, they step up into full force, great leadership. And not always great, like we know that's not the reality of it, but they step up. And that's, I think, a dream that all organizations are trying to achieve. And yet there's almost these unwritten rules that some people are really expected to step up while others can hang back. And in a DAO, I think one of the beautiful things is that you do get to choose your own journey, choose your own level of engagement. And when you have work that's not just assigned, but it's truly opt-in, what you get is a much more engaged human being on the end of that interaction. They want to step up, they want to contribute. And the 23 people that we interviewed, when we asked them, how did you get into leadership? When would you say you felt like you were actually leading in a DAO? It was really when other people started to come to them for counsel or advice or direction. That was one way that they knew, is almost engaging in that guiding process. But also it was when they felt like they contributed something meaningful and could tell it had an impact in moving the work of the DAO forward. And so these are just some indicators that people said is when they felt like they were leading in DAOs, but also actually getting into it was just stepping up. Like, this is where permissionlessness, I think, is a beautiful, beautiful guiding principle for the space. Is the work I do in traditional organizations, you might get a VP that is saying, I'm not sure if I have permission to do that because they're unsure how the SVP feels about it. What a waste of effort, time, talent, energy that a VP in an organization doesn't feel empowered or emboldened to make decisions when it's for the benefit of the organization. That is where permissionlessness, I think, is so powerful for any organization, is to understand that we need to create environments and systems where people feel psychologically safe to take risk in the name of trying to benefit the organization. And we don't always feel safe to do that. And there's a lot of ingredients that go into the neuroscience behind creating a psychologically safe environment and for a person to feel psychologically safe to assume that risk. And yet the principle of trying to create organizations like DAOs, where people can really just raise their hand, they can step up and at a very little, in a very little way, perhaps, in the very nascent environment of DAOs, just start assuming leadership roles. For many of these people, it's the only organizations they've been a part of, some of the people that I spoke with. And for others that have been part of lots of other organizations, they're amazed and surprised at how fast things can move, how much greater sense of agency they feel, how they can promote somebody into a role that they deserve and not have to wait multiple years because that's how you are supposed to wait for promotional cycles just to get this person there where they can have the impact that you already know they're capable of. And so there's so many things about this permissionlessness to really think through the lens of what benefits DAOs and what benefits that organization that I think is really compelling and exciting. And then I'm probably getting a little bit away, Christina, from your initial prompt, but I will tell you that I am so excited for the potential and the promise that DAOs hold. If nothing else, to be an experimental ground to learn how we shape all organizations across the world to be better for the human beings engaging with them. I think there's a lot of lessons being learned that aren't necessarily being communicated that would benefit anybody to have a healthier, happier relationship with their work.
Wow. Wow, Lisa, that was great. And I actually don't even remember the prompt either, but I'm gonna just piggyback off of what Lisa said and provided because so many points. I want to tie in with the psychological safety, and we psychological safety really has to do with creating an environment where people feel safe to raise concerns, to share their opinions, to engage, and that develops over time, and it develops as a result of the communication that we value you, we value your input, we value all of your input, and so it's something that isn't just there off the bat. It does develop, and it is so incredibly important for, and I think especially for DAOs, to achieve what you're trying to achieve in a DAO. And so it may be helpful, and this is where I kind of now put on my academic hat and my training hat, because I have found that training people, and most of it has been focused on supervisors, well, really all of it, supervisors and managers. But when we train people about the importance of these social relationships and the importance of this psychological safety and the importance of respect and honoring people, that results in such a better working organization. And if we apply that further to DAOs, so we can think of it as leadership, but we actually also we're thinking about that now. And my most recent graduate who's starting a faculty position in the fall, Shailene Allen, she really is interested in coworker support, which I think just completely fits in here. And it's maybe something that DAOs can use, is some, I mean, and again, it's training, it's general training on how to interact with each other. And I think that's something that may be, because what she's doing and what we're doing together is we're developing this training to generalize to teaching team members how to respect and care about one another, and how to support that safety within and within the teams, because it clearly, this is, as you're saying, you want everybody to be able to feel comfortable contributing, and that may not be automatic for everybody. And so if we can provide some tools for people so they understand how they can actually facilitate that type of support in others, it may be very useful. So just something to think about. And then because of this concept that everybody is a leader. And so, and I always think of tools, I always think of interventions from my workplace psychology perspective. So I think that could be helpful. And I'm not sure of the prompt, and I'm actually going to have to say that I am so sorry, but I have to jump to another meeting. And this has been really, for me, amazing. And I will be in touch with you all. And Lisa, I'm going to reach out to you. Katerina, I'm going to reach out to you as well. And thank you so much, Christina, for inviting me, and Joshua for pushing pushing forward with this, and Meredith for all the work that you're doing, and the others, everybody, for all of the work that you're doing. So thank you so much. And I'm going to pop off, but enjoy the continued discussion.
She's gone. I just wanted to say thank you for her, what she was sharing. What to add to that? Like, maybe what can be added to the conversation that we already had about uh, how to help people find leadership position in DAOs is to, maybe we need smaller goals that can be achieved in a shorter time frame, so that people can step into leadership position or experience leadership behavior, or experience, or observing themselves actually behaving like a leader in a shorter time frame, and with less risk, and kind of like a month people can commit to it, doing like a half a year project that sometimes is just too much. So maybe that's one way, because often it's, when we think about leaders, we think about the great leaders of history and stuff like that, and saying, oh no, I'm not like that, I can't be a leader. But then I don't know, you take leadership in the house and you cook fabulous meals, and you don't think this is leadership, because this is just, I don't know, cooking, or this is just showing your friends around in a town, and you don't think this is leadership, but it is also leadership. So we are all having certain areas of expertise, and speaking up and guiding discussions in the areas we're strong in. That's a form of leadership. Or also listening to other people, we're showing, or we're demonstrating leadership behavior then. So it's on one side, smaller goals can help us, but on the other side also making it clear to everybody that leadership doesn't have to be this grand thing. It's often in the everyday things that everybody of us is a leader.
Thank you. This was, I had a lot of high expectations for this conversation, but it definitely exceeded. There are some really inspiring people here who have not, who have stayed on mute this whole time. I don't want to put Hodlon on the spot, but I would like to put him on the spot and see if he wants to respond. Same with Mother Mercurial and Meredith and Josh. If we want to just kind of open this up. I don't know, Katerina, how much time you have. But yeah, do you have a few minutes?
Yeah, I can stay in for a bit longer.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Does anyone have any? Yeah.
Yeah, just a thought that I had. I'm kind of interested in, it's all been like very fascinating, and I've enjoyed this entire presentation and conversation. And I've been thinking, I'm curious how to like there's kind of I'm curious to dig into like some of these papers and kind of these big level ideas that we're sharing. And I'm wondering if there's a way to like my brain is trying to like bridge them to like, you know, real world, like in the weeds DAO type of things, and pull it into the space that I think a lot of us are, you know, working directly in. So maybe that's just kind of a rumination or a thought I've had. Maybe there's a question in there somewhere to kind of throw into the mix. And it's not very specific. But yeah, I mean, leadership in DAOs is such a slippery concept as well, and it's a very like new space, like new territory that we're going into with this. So yeah, I'm wondering maybe if there's a way to like ground a little bit, like ground us back to the work that we like came from doing this morning and are going back to doing, you know, back to building in Web3. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can share some thoughts. Katerina, I think you'd be excellent to share some thoughts here, of course. And so, at least for me, I think grounding it. So the way that I've seen people really need to assess their DAO in a lot of ways, especially if you're in a position where you're really focused on moving the work of a particular DAO forward. I think the main thing that that I would share is like even just a grounding principle is, do people understand what the goal is? Oftentimes DAOs have taken on multiple different evolutions as new people have come in and come out, where they lose sight of that shared purpose. And like with Talent DAO, for example, there was like an initial purpose, but then when there was a core team of us, like for 7 of us, we co-authored a manifesto that was by the initial core team. And especially with the core team in general, you want to hope that your core team, because pretty much realistically, all DAOs are starting centralized. Like when they're talking about centralization, it's like, yeah, all DAOs are basically startups when they start, and they are very centralized. It's a couple people with an idea, galvanizing other people to say, hey, are you into this idea as well? And the goal is to have the progressive decentralization. And so at least at Talent DAO, what we did was there was like the initial idea, but then we had a collective manifesto. And that was something that then when our DAO took on different shapes and forms, when we went through different funding cycles, we had to re-look at it and say, is this still the product that we're trying to go after? At one point, we were trying to basically thwart traditional academia and say, what is our like open source publishing platform that we can have on chain? And that was like the product that we were initially focused on. But then funding for that and the direction for that wasn't as interesting or coming in as much as funding for research projects to help out other DAOs and support other DAOs. So we kind of turned our focus there, and we had this moment of, okay, what is the goal? And so I think anytime you look at high performance research, they basically ground you in a map that's usually like 4 to 5 steps. And it always starts with like, what's the shared purpose? What's the shared goal? Because you can't really get to a lot of high performance in any organization without that being clear. And so that's, I think, one big grounding thing. The second step is role clarification. So like, what's the goal? What's my role? Like, those are the 2 things that in my mind at Talent DAO, it's like, what's the goal of this? What are people's role in this? And the role doesn't need to be defined by like a title or status. It doesn't need to be all mapped out like an org chart, traditional style. A lot of people have almost an aversion to traditional HR practices. And so it really matters that your community comes together and creates like the language or the format that feels comfortable and flexible enough, often something on Notion. So when new people come in, or whatever platform, so when new people come in, they can get a sense of what is the goal of this place and what is the role. So especially when I'm talking with other DAOs, I'm like, those are step 1 and step 2. If you don't have those, it's really hard for new people to come in and even get a sense of how they might step up into even offering to contribute. So I hope that maybe gives some very like practical, insight.
It's amazing the parallels between, like, we're just talking about, you know, in any organization, any project on any level, you know, it's all the same. Defining the goals, defining who is going to take those on and move those forward, checking in about them, iterating along the way. It's just, yes, it's fascinating, interesting. We've grounded back full circle.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think one of the things that I'm loving that I'm seeing DAOs do is, instead of like, you know, we have like the onboarding in Discord where you read through the couple of things, or maybe, you know, there's even a site that you go to or something, but is having more mentorship built in. And I think that's really great, like to the social support commentary that was happening on this call, is when you have mentors that are willing to give a little bit of their time and ways to just connect people. I think that that goes over and immediately makes your new community members feel so much more engaged. And it's more than just like a mass onboarding call. It's really about, you know, getting that. Cabin DAO is a great example of this. They have like kind of the mass onboarding calls and stuff, but a lot of the work that they talk about is that the work of their DAO is really moved forward by groups of 3 people. So like if you can get like a group of 3 having some, as Katerina mentioned, like a clear low barrier thing that they can drive toward and accomplish, you'll see a lot more engagement in your DAO. So I think that also is the reality of a lot of DAOs, is they're not moving forward as one big giant collective. They're moving forward in these pockets of like 3 to 4 people who are really passionate about a piece of the larger picture. Katerina,
Yeah,
sorry, I know I went, yeah.
no worries. I absolutely love to listen to you, and like you're sharing a lot of great insight. I'm gonna add to it by not being very grounded, kind of as Christina, kind of just I'm gonna be out there in the middle of the universe. So I say we need more opportunities for people to claim their leadership role. So by making it clear what their expertise is, but not just, you know, I hate it when you have to do an introduction and say, I'm an expert in blah, blah, blah. That's my background, because everybody could write whatever they want. So there needs to be a different system in place, maybe something around badges where other people actually recognize your expertise in, I don't know, strategic thinking or Figma or help giving and stuff like that, and kind of can attribute that to you. And there needs to be the knowledge that, as was mentioned, like most DAOs, when they start centralizing just because that's normal. It's a small group of people who decide to do something, and then like I am part of one DAO with some guy just joined and said, oh, this is far too centralized. We need to kind of, you know, take everybody out of certain committees and just decentralize it without actually understanding the whole context of this DAO and the history of it. And that at the stage that this DAO currently is, it needs to be more centralized than decentralized. Unless within 6 months, nothing exists. And then I think we need something around rotating leadership, or maybe not allowing people to regain prior leadership roles, because once people start building or thinking that they can build their career in a DAO, they're turning into politicians, and then will they still have the same interest in mind than everybody else? You know, it changes the game once you put processes in place in order to secure your future.
I love that. I think, you know, there's 2 sides to that. There's the DAOs that are trying to almost, yeah, like secure their future, or everybody knows them, or they've been around longer, so people just assume and defer to them, and that it just kills the innovation and like the goodness that could come from that DAO, because people are just deferring to people who are, you know, just been there longer. And that's not a good measure of who's best fit to be moving that work of the DAO forward in a given moment. And then there's the other side of it, which is, you know, like Mega Gamma Delta is a good example of this, where come in very lively, woman focused DAO that's really got a lot of energy behind them. And then also kind of in the crypto winter, seeing a slowdown like so many other DAOs, where you have to think differently about how do you engage people to lead the next group forward. And so there's actually an intentional design of ushering in like the next ambassadors or the next people that will be almost the next cohort of leadership for the next era of that DAO. And I think that's, again, a model that a lot of different places are experimenting with, because they want people to be, you know, engaged, and they want people to see fresh new faces, but also have the opportunities to step up and lead in their DAO.
You know, Lisa, I was thinking about this in like the way DAOs are summoned, where, you know, with like Moloch DAO, they tend to not want to dilute shares. But with Nouns DAOs, it's like built into it. You 100% will have shares diluted. I think like Giveth had something where, you know, you have the token holders, but then you also have contributors that earn tokens, and it's on a bonding curve where original contributors can only be like 1 token more than newer contributors. So the newer ones that are whoever is actually contributing right now can actually earn power, versus some of these other ones where no matter how much you contribute, you can't earn power.
Yeah, I think that's so fascinating. And I've had a lot of people, it almost sounds like the gripes of traditional organizations when they get into a context where they're like, it almost doesn't even matter how much, tokens I accrue. It's like all these people already hold all the power anyway. And so that again is that stripping people's sense of agency away. And once they figure out that that's how the infrastructure is set up, it's pretty clear that you're removing that incentive for them to want to keep contributing at your DAO. So I also think that's where the whole space of how are you designing your token environment that people might be stepping into is really huge. And I have to do a shameless plug for the last research project I just did, because we interviewed 41 different token engineers about their token engineering practices as part of the Token Engineering Commons. And the things that came out of there was just how mindful you need to be about incentive structures. And it's so fascinating when you look at the implications for DAOs in that body of work, because they're designing it for all sorts of different organizations, but especially when it comes to DAOs, it's like Katerina said this really well, or actually it might have been Leslie, that how much your interactions really do matter. And I think that's a big piece of it is your token, the way you set up your token needs to exemplify the way you want your interactions to be thought about, and whether people will see them as mattering or not.
So that, yeah, it also gets to the point of Katerina spoke about, playing around, and like having agency within the DAO to play with different things, because maybe your token incentives are not working, so they need to be tweaked, and that's fine as well. And Lisa, I'm curious if you have thoughts, because that makes me think of like a balance within an organization, within a DAO, of like as a whole, how much intent and resources are being put in at any given time to the tokenomics, to the incentives, to the like HR and the structure, versus an actual like what is the purpose, creating a product or putting something out there. So I'm curious what you found in your research that supports those concepts.
Yeah, I think at least for me personally, this is where I get excited about the longevity of the space. Just getting a couple different cycles under our belt and just having people have more experiences at multiple different DAOs. Because I will say, at least my observation is the people that I interviewed that were more intentional, it often was because they had a prior DAO experience that went bust, or that was really great. Often it went bust, and that they were trying to like have a redemption story where they still believed in DAOs, but they didn't want to do things like they did before. One example on like transparency is MoonDAO. So MoonDAO was one that was created. The founder had worked primarily, or had been a part of Constitution DAO, and in Constitution DAO there were separate Telegram threads, like many DAOs still today, where there's side conversations. And so maybe you have your Discord where some of the dialogue is transparent, but then there's also other conversations that you don't have visibility to, because maybe it's like the original founders have their own space that you don't see. And so one of the things that I really respect and love that MoonDAO did was make every channel in the Discord visible, like transparent. So it's, even if you can't contribute to it, you have a read-only capability, so you can read everything that's happening. And that to me is like, when we look at the different spectrums of how centralized or decentralized you are at a given point, or how transparent or private are you, I think this is one that I always look at as a really beautiful case for how you can have more radical transparency. And so that was a very intentional design into that DAO. Whereas I think there's other ones that are honestly, like I know Bankless DAO is one that it wasn't until later they started formulating maybe some more of those HR practices to address issues. And I think that's also very true of a lot of DAOs, is realizing, oh, we might have like a natural version of HR, and at the same time, like, oh, this is why it exists. These things are horrible, and ooh, I don't want to have to deal with those. And so one of the areas that I interviewed with leadership was the token engineering commons, and they were actually one of the very few examples that I interviewed that at the time, and this is a few years ago, had actually a conflict resolution process in place that they designed very intentionally. And if you know the token engineering commons, you know that they're very intentional about the human design inside of this phenomenon as much as the tech side. And so one of the things that I thought was really wonderful is they not only have tools like praise that help acknowledge and reward people, but also ones like their conflict resolution style that give people a roadmap of when things don't go quite how we would want, or are less than desirable, or are a hot, sticky mess, that you actually have a way to pursue those inquiries. And so I know Bankless also has stuff like that. I know all these other DAOs have had to create things like that, but I think in most cases, like many organizations, it's been more of a reaction to, oh, this is a problem that now we need to address. It's a problem to be solved versus an intentional strategic choice. Hope that answers.
It's kind of like, well, it's kind of like the leaders are the ones maybe with experience that are willing to step up, or like previous experience, like, right, prior experience. And like one might become a leader in a DAO because of the, you know, a meritocracy of like other projects they've been a part of. Right, it's like, hey, I came from this other DAO and this didn't work this way, so I want to try it this way. And then they are by default leading in that moment.
Yeah, I will say one interesting story was somebody that I interviewed from Maker that they bounced out and came in at a different DAO under a different pseudonym, just so they didn't carry that baggage. So I think for some, they might view it as like, this is what I'm going to build on. This is what I'm going to contribute, is all my prior experience. And for others, it's how do I shake experiences and begin anew, or have a fresh set of eyes, or get to contribute a different set of strengths. And that's something that I also think is interesting that DAOs can afford people, is at times fresh starts in organizations more fluidly than a traditional organization where you just have your one resume. And so, yeah, I think there's lots of cool potential there. I'd be curious what others on this call think. I know I've been talking a lot, and hopefully it's been helpful or useful, but I'm wanting to learn and wanting to hear what others think about the topic. What's resonating?
I want to hear what Meredith's thinking about, not to put you on the spot.
Sure, yeah, trying to gather some thoughts. Really interesting things shared here. I'm curious to go back just a little bit in terms of what's happening on the ground and how DAOs can be a better form of work. We've talked a lot about social supports and how DAOs can improve those. Where do you bridge that with financial supports? So this is not an insight, it's just another question, I guess. But I know that a lot of DAOs struggle with financial incentives, and something that Katerina mentioned earlier is that, you know, intrinsic motivation is kind of a privilege. So for folks who want to make an income in DAOs, what are DAOs that are doing that well? What are some learnings we can take from that? I think that's still a major struggle.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Meredith, you know, since we've talked before in person, even my own journey in DAOs, I think is, I have the privilege of getting to work in DAOs because I have some Web2 paying clients that will pay for things. My journey in Web3 has not been one of the fountain filleth over, or whatever you would say with that. I do think that there's a funding issue in general, but I also think this is true for startups. And so again, some of it I think is really indicative of where we're at in the longevity. I think when you start getting early round, you do have more centralized DAOs that are on a path to progressive decentralization. You also have underfunded efforts that are seeking funding in various different ways. A lot of the leaders that I interviewed, a lot of their funding sources came from VCs or from grant funding, and VCs were basically the two big ways. Also, over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of discussion in DAOs of, can DAOs just be about a meaningful purpose, or is that just a club? And do you really need to actually be more thoughtful and intentional about having a true product or service or something that you're providing out to the community, that there's a business model around that you've thought through how this will eventually generate money, hopefully in not an attract, extract type of model. And so I think those are still problems to be solved for the space in general, but I think a lot of the people that I'm connected with at least find that they're getting the funding sources through looking at various job boards that are DAOs that are really serious about actually posting and promoting that they have positions where they want people. And when you step into roles like that, you're likely getting paid. What I will say though is it is a privileged space to be working in DAOs and being paid. There's still a lot of people that are grossly underpaid, a lot of positions where people even kind of expect you to earn your way by working unpaid for a very long amount of time. And I know there's people in the space that say that's just part of earning your way, and other people in the space that are deeply against that because it has a lot of different inequities when it comes to opportunity and accessibility for particularly women and people of color. So I know there's, again, that whole concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, accessibility for resources, and how do we help people have equal opportunities coming into the space. And right now it seems like a lot of people just need to earn their way and do it as a side gig until they can find those positions that actually do pay for them to be full-time. So most people I talk to, they're on a journey into what they hope is full-time Web3 work, or they've already been established in the space, but they've been around for 2-3 years plus. So that's an area where, Christina, I'd love to hear your thoughts, or others on the call too, because it's a grab bag, a mixed bag for me.
Yeah, I love all of that, and I'll let Christina jump in. I do. I also want to note that you mentioned business models. I think a lot about business models. I'm also really optimistic, and I think it sounds like PDX DAO and Ethereal Forest DAO are really tapped into new ways of thinking about funding and how we gather resources together instead of just always relying on revenue sources that are more traditional. So love what's happening with that in the space too.
Yeah, we actually have a week dedicated to, let me see. I think it's the last, either the 5th or 6th week, we're going to talk about funding. I know Party DAO is an interesting thing to look at because what you're crowdfunding for is a liquidity pool. And then the DAO treasury is made up of transaction fees, which is interesting. I know I'm taking a token engineering fundamentals course right now. And, applying, yeah, I mean, AMMs, DeFi, like all these things can be applied. You do have to have some capital to start off with to like get it going. But then that's another thing about DAOs is crowdfunding is like I mean, if you have a community that believes in what you're doing, you can crowdfund pretty quick, a significant amount. And then if you apply some of the token engineering strategies, I think that's what Party DAO is trying to do, that platform. It's interesting. I personally tend to work on commission, and sometimes I will get paid like a service contract, but those tend to go towards technical people, not so much non-technical people. Yeah, and then also I've applied for so many grants, not just for myself, but for other projects. And yeah, that's usually where the commission comes in, is if I can get someone a grant, then I'll get a little kickback on that. Which is weird. That's adding more bureaucracy, right? Like, now we need to have grants used to be, DAO grants used to be just like give out the grant and then that's it. And now they have all these milestones and impact metrics. So now you need to know how to find the grant, how to apply to the grant, because each round, each project, sorry, each each, I guess, organization offering the grants has a new way they do grants for each round. And then you have to find where the information is either on Schomburg's or it's in the forum. And then different types of rounds have different ways. Like some of them you need to like really do a lot of marketing because it's kind of a popularity contest. And others of them, they're like, you can't talk to the delegates. If you do, you'll get disqualified. So it's very tricky to get funded. It's there. It's
Yeah.
just a lot of hoops.
I will say the research projects that I did were all grant funded. Maybe crowdfunded for a little bit, but grant funded primarily. And then during like more of the crypto winter, like about year and a half ago, a lot of the grants specifically said for research, they wouldn't fund it. Like it had to be a direct build on chain. Otherwise it was not going to be funded. I got some really nice notes back, very encouraging. So it was nice to see that there was like interest, but it was also a no. And so I think that was a bit of the struggle that hopefully there will be more wind in the sails in the future.
Yeah, Together Crew that Katerina is building, I remember when they showed up for a Moloch DAO grant, I'm like, Moloch DAO is not going to fund you, but Metacartel will. So let's go bring you over there. Yeah, it's tricky. And that one is a really cool project because you can get these social graphs of your community based on activity in Discord. And I think they're going to move to expand to Farcaster. And, you know, these are things that we would really love to see as we're working together. But it's very hard to get funding for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just add on. Can you all hear me well?
Mhm.
Cool. Yeah, I think the horizontal potential that DAOs have is like really exciting because obviously most DAOs are not in a place to pay people full salaries. And I think the ability, like some of like the work that like the MicroFi crew is doing, and we're looking into how we can actually like share funds again horizontally between DAOs and also just share capacity and like doing work. Like Lisa, the research that you all have done, you've gone out and actually just turned to doing research for DAOs. And I just think like as more service DAOs come about at like the global level, we can connect that. And then also, because this is local DAO summer, thinking about like building like local economic systems, how we can be connecting once we have more and more DAOs that are whatever place-based service DAOs, how they can be connecting and sharing resources, like capacity-wise and financially.
I love that. That's exciting. My MicroFi every year. I love that.
Oh, Lisa, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining right now. I hope we get to hang out in person soon. Please, everybody come to the GFL. I really want everyone on GFL so we can all hang out.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you all so much. I really appreciate you listening in. Feel free to connect with me. I'm Lisa Wocken on everything. So if you need to find me, it's really easy. And yeah, I just really appreciate your time and listening, and happy to hear, of course, any thoughts and ways that you're advancing stuff in the space. I really appreciate being connected to the community. Thank you, Christina. This has been awesome. Week 3, kicking off strong.
I think so. Yep. Now we need to make sure all the DAOs hear this.
Yay.
All right, stopping the recording.
Thanks, everyone.